Welcome back, viewers, to latest researches and news today. We have 4 updates that the world needs to hear. First of all, we talk about Debretsion's peaks in Mekelle. Tigray is done waiting for peace. The resistance is going to a new level. Secondly, about Tigray people, Liberation Front is preparing for both defense and offense. Heavy troop movements have been confirmed. After that, we will talk about Abiy Ahmed's blockade of Tigray has now lasted longer than the Nazi siege of Leningrad. This is not a policy. This is a crime against humanity. And in last, is Tigray becoming a de facto independent state? And what would that mean for Ethiopia itself? Stay with us. This is the most important video we've made. Mekelle, Tigray's capital, a public forum packed with residents, and at the center of it all, one man, Debretsion TPLF chairman, president of Tigray. What he said at that forum was not a political speech. It was a declaration that Tigray's patience has run out, and that the struggle is moving to a new and more serious level. Tonight we break down exactly what he said, what it means, and why the world must pay attention right now. Let's start with the speech itself. Standing before the people of Mekelle, Debretsion said something that cuts straight to the heart of where Tigray stands today. There is a need for a collective resolve as a people to answer the basic questions of the people of Tigray. Basic questions. Sovereignty, the return of displaced people. Development, justice. He spoke about the Pretoria Agreement, the peace deal signed in 2022 that was supposed to end the war. He said Tigray entered that agreement with genuine hope. They hoped for sovereignty. They hoped to see their displaced people return home. They hoped for reconstruction and development. What they got was the opposite. He was blunt. Peace cannot be expected from a genocidal regime. The Prosperity Party Abiy Ahmed's government has never been ready for peace and will never be ready for peace. And then he said what the people of Mekelle had come to hear. We should take our struggle to a meaningful level. The residents who attended the forum left with one message. They are determined to fight with everything Tigray has to overthrow the prosperity regime. This is not rhetoric. This is a people who have been pushed to the edge and who are now looking over it, calculating whether to jump. And behind Debretsion's speech there is military movement that confirms this is more than words. TPLF head Debretsion stated that the end is preparing to launch a war in Tigray. Since that warning, the TPLF has warned the international community of the imminent risk of conflict. But the TPLF is not sitting still, waiting to be attacked. They have publicly said they are prepared for both defense and offense. The war can start at any moment, and when it does, Tigray will not be caught unprepared like it was in November 2020. From credible sources on the ground, footage has emerged showing heavy movement of TPLF fighters across the region. Not defensive repositioning. Active organized movement, the kind you see before an operation. The Tigray Defense Forces currently have between 250,000 and 270,000 active personnel, a military force larger than many African nations' entire armies. The Ethiopian National Defense Force has massed troops, heavy artillery, and tanks at multiple locations along the Tigray regional border and has redeployed forces from Amhara and Oromia toward Tigray, including from regions already facing active insurgencies. Both sides are moving. Both sides are ready. The only question is who fires first and who bears the consequences. But here is what is critically different from 2020. After 25 years of open hostility between the Eritrean regime and the TPLF, Eritrea has now positioned itself as an ally to Debretsion's faction. The regional balance of power has completely shifted. If war comes, it will not be Tigray alone versus Ethiopia. The entire Horn of Africa is now aligned differently. Now let's talk about something that deserves to be on the front page of every newspaper in the world, but isn't. Abiy Ahmed's economic and military siege of Tigray, and how long it has been going on. The siege of Leningrad, carried out by Nazi German forces during World War II, lasted 872 days. It killed over 800,000 people through starvation alone. It is remembered as one of the most horrific war crimes in human history. The Nazi commanders responsible were hunted, tried, and sentenced. Abiy Ahmed's siege of Tigray has now lasted more than 2,000 days. 2,000 days. More than 5 years. A siege longer than the Nazis' most infamous atrocity, and the world is still debating whether to call it a crime. Federal policies introduced after the Pretoria Agreement have preserved many of the conditions that devastated civilian life during the war. Rather than facilitating normalization, the agreement enabled Abiy Ahmed's government to exercise sustained political and economic pressure over Tigray while maintaining the diplomatic appearance of peace. The result is a post-war order defined by managed deprivation. Abiy Ahmed's recent actions, freezing effort operations, halting supplementary budgets, restricting fuel supplies, and cutting the flow of essential goods to Tigray constitute deliberate acts that signal both the continuation of war and systematic strangulation of the region. And what has this siege done to the people? Over 4.4 million people remain displaced, many unable to return home due to continued occupation. Reports indicate that nearly half of all deaths in Tigray are caused by starvation, with malnutrition among children reaching alarming levels. Humanitarian aid remains severely restricted due to ongoing conflict, bureaucratic obstacles, and the Ethiopian government's lack of cooperation. Health and education authorities in Tigray have sounded the alarm that they cannot pay staff or continue critical work. Conditions are beginning to dangerously resemble the humanitarian blockade imposed during the last war. Nearly 1 million people in Tigray remain internally displaced from the 2020-2022 conflict, largely dependent on limited aid to survive. This is not a political dispute. This is not a counter-terrorism operation. This is the deliberate starvation of millions of people as an instrument of war. If this had happened in Europe, the international community would have intervened years ago. But it is happening in Tigray, and the world calls it a peace process. And now the most explosive question of all. If Abiy Ahmed continues this project of economic siege and military encirclement, forcing Tigray to choose between surrender and separation, is Tigray on the path to becoming an independent state? Under the 1933 Montevideo Convention, the foundational document of international law on statehood, there are 4 criteria for a state to exist. 1. A permanent population. Tigray has 1. 2. A defined territory. Tigray has 1 contested in some border areas, but substantially defined. 3. An effective government. The TPLF has reinstated its administration, with Debretsion formally taking over offices in Mekelle, armed men patrolling streets, and an administrative apparatus operating independently of Addis Ababa. 4. The capacity to enter into relations with other states. Debretsion has already disclosed previously and disclosed talks with Eritrea, confirming that Tigray's leadership has been engaging in foreign diplomacy independently of the Ethiopian federal government. By international legal standards, Tigray is closer to de facto statehood than most people realize. But here is the critical warning that must be understood. Tigray's separation from Ethiopia would not be a victory, not for Tigray, not for Ethiopia, not for the region. If Tigray separates, it opens a door that cannot be closed. Oromia, Amhara, Benishangul Gumuz. Other regions watching, waiting, calculating. Ethiopia could fracture along ethnic lines, the way Yugoslavia disintegrated into smaller conflicts, each deadlier than the last. The answer is not separation. The answer is the removal of Abiy Ahmed's genocidal regime and the formation of a genuine transitional government that represents all of Ethiopia's peoples. A united front of all resistance forces TPLF, Fano, Ola, and others against the one enemy they all share, a government that has made war on its own people. Let's bring everything together. Debretsion has spoken. The patience of Tigray's people is finished. They have endured years of broken promises, economic strangulation, drone strikes, and displacement, and they are choosing to fight back. The TPLF is prepared for defense and for offense. Heavy movements have been confirmed. The region is on a war footing. The siege of Tigray has lasted longer than the Leningrad blockade. It is causing starvation, displacement, and death on a massive scale. It is a crime against humanity, and history will judge those who stayed silent. And if this regime is not stopped, if the international community does not act, then Tigray may have no choice but to pursue statehood. And that outcome will not save Tigray alone. It will begin the unraveling of Ethiopia entirely. The people of Tigray did not choose this war. They have tried peace. They gave the Pretoria Agreement every chance. What they have received in return is a siege, a blockade, bombs on their cities, and a government that calls genocide a law enforcement operation. That ends now. We will keep watching. Like, share and subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the truth.